And we're live. Welcome to Set
All
Impacts, where
right.
we discuss how emerging technology is changing sectors, society, and the world at large. I've made slight change from now. Every morning at 8 a.m., I'll be speaking to innovative founders solving some of the hardest and most interesting problems over LinkedIn Live. Today, I'm joined by the co-founder of Brainentech, Shomo. How are you?
I am good. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
I, I appreciate you jumping on this morning. What part of India are you currently based in right now, and how are things given COVID?
We are in Bangalore,
Okay.
and actually, things have been handled pretty decently here compared to many of the other Indian cities. Lockdowns
Okay.
have been severe. People have been sort of mindful of of the rules and all. So it's okay. It's decently fine over here.
It's amazing. I mean, how has it affected the way you work now? Like, are you guys working remotely, or are you guys in an office?
I mean, I would say it's a little easier now. I mean, just try to think that 6 months ago, when we didn't have a company, we were going through Entrepreneur First.
Hmm.
We just knew who our possible co-founder was, and at that time, we had to be in separate locations. So we had to do the company formation separately, and
Oh,
that is very
wow.
hard. That
Yeah.
is very hard. And so we had to do, coming up with business plan, coming up with making sure the tech was fine or not, and then clearing investment committee and everything. So all that had to be done without looking at your co-founder face to face. So that was the hardest part, in my opinion.
That's crazy. So, did you and your co-founder actually meet in person, or did you only meet virtually and co-found the company
No,
virtually?
so thankfully we had like 3 weeks before the
Okay.
lockdowns began.
Yeah.
So, but it was just 3 weeks of face-to-face interaction, and then everything was, I mean, everything was
Mm,
online. I didn't see his
mm.
face. So,
So, fair enough. Fair enough. Sure, but what is the vision and mission of Brain and Tech?
all right, twofolds. Number one, to have artificial intelligence systems which are very good at understanding brain activity, human brain activity. So these AI can look at different brain activity and can tell what your brain was doing when this recording was done. That's number one.
Mhm.
Number two is to have seamless brain interfaces. Could be like a glass or some little thing that you wear on your head, something that anybody and everybody can and will have in the future. Like everybody has a smartphone right now. So in the future, everybody will have a seamless brain interface somewhere hidden under their hair.
Mm,
Um, and there will be this AI, which I mentioned, working in the background, always deciphering what your brain is doing. And with
mm,
this, there will be a lot of things that become possible for you to do. It'll basically enhance your cognitive abilities as a human. So that's the
mm.
vision.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I went through your LinkedIn profile. It was quite fascinating, I must say. Could you tell the audience about your background and what kind of inspired you to leave academia and join EF and co-found a company?
Right, right. So the inspiration has always been to study the human brain. How does it
Mm,
work? How does it generate consciousness? How does it store memory? How does it learn? So that is what pushed me into neuroscience, and then I did a PhD in neuroscience. So during my PhD, I was doing deep brain recordings, kind of like what Neuralink is trying to do right now, where you put a probe inside the brain, and you record activity of individual neurons, which are the brain cells,
mm,
and then you try to figure out how the brain is encoding some information. So
mm.
that was during my PhD. And the reason
Yeah.
I went out of academia and into forming a company is that um, right now in today's world, I feel that uh, entrepreneurship is a very good vehicle to push any kind of science or technology. Any
Mm,
innovation that you would want to do can be done, in my opinion, currently much better in an entrepreneurial environment than in the academic setting. The academic setting is very slow, a lot of bureaucracies, there are a lot of problems. The money is
mm,
also limited. But here in the entrepreneurial world, if you can show that you're adding value to somebody's life, uh, then you will have money flowing in, and then you can push the technology that you wanted to push. You'll have greater impact and much sooner than if you were in academia. So these were the things that made me think, I should shift.
mm. Right now, okay, could you talk about the initial product that you're developing? I mean,
Yeah.
your vision was bold and rightfully so, but I mean, obviously, you have to start somewhere and have a
Yeah.
vehicle for revenue initially.
Hmm.
Could you talk a little bit more about that product? If you have it, then feel free to show it as well.
Right. So what we are initially developing right now. It's an AI, so unfortunately I can't like show it to you right
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
But maybe later I can share some of the very cool insights that we have received from our partners. So
Okay.
basically, the first part is the AI, artificial intelligence that we are developing, which understands activity from the human brain. So right now, what we are doing is that we are using some off-the-shelf devices to record brain activity of human beings as they're doing various things, and then we are training an algorithm, a deep learning algorithm, into decoding what that person was doing when this recording was taken. So we have those AIs ready, and as you mentioned, that there has to be some source of revenue, right? How do we deploy this? So the first few areas that we thought where we can use this AI and where we see pretty good traction is the world of edtech, which is just booming right now in
Mm.
India and I'm sure elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
But they face a problem that a lot of the people don't finish their courses. It's not engaging. So the same rules that work for classroom coaching is not going to work in an online environment. So the edtech companies need to make their content very engaging and comprehensible. So what we went and offered is that, okay, when your students are watching whatever content you've created, we'll record their brain activity and we'll tell you how engaged they are. And in case they're not engaged, we will tell you the exact points where you lost them and what you can do to improve your content. Because
Mm.
it's not just engagement that we can tell. From the brain activity, we can tell a person's visual attention, auditory attention, cognitive processing, interest levels. We can tell all of these things. Like, suppose if you're watching a video and somebody's just coming and giving you a lecture, maybe your interest level is going to drop. And the
Mm.
moment you see an animated figure come on, or moment they throw a pop quiz at you, we can see the interest level spike up. So you got to do those kind of little tricks in order to keep it engaging in an online educational environment. So that's number
Mm.
one. And correspondingly, we are looking at the gaming world as well, as making games more entertaining. And actually, interestingly, a merge of those two, people are more and more leaning towards educational games, games which can teach useful attributes to younger children, games that can teach useful concepts to people. So those kind of things, making those games comprehensible and engaging. And we can tell all of that by looking at the brain activity, right? And
Mm.
of course, there are huge applications in the world of mental health, which we are not, which we are sort of just beginning to explore right now.
Mhm. I mean, I definitely want to touch on the mental health component. So in terms of you ascertaining that data, you're using like a almost like an EEG device. What is it?
So currently, it's an EEG device,
Yeah.
which it's very much like a headphone right now.
Yeah.
So we unfortunately deployed all of them to pilots very
Okay. Fair
recently.
enough.
So it looks exactly like a headphone that you wear,
Mm.
and it has sensors which are reading the brain activity. So basically, your brain is made up of these little neurons which fire an electrical activity every time they try to encode an information. So
Mm.
you can detect the disturbance in these electrical waves from outside of the head as well. And
Mm.
depending upon which part of the brain is more active and what kind of activity it's showing, you can decipher what that brain was doing at that point of time, right?
Mm.
So that's what we are using. That is basically the setup to catch the brain activity. But the really complex part comes after that, where we are using a combination of cognitive neuroscience and deep learning to
Mm.
decipher the neural code, basically.
Mm. Was this EEG machine? I mean, is it proprietary? Is it something that you've built yourself, or is it an off-the-shelf device?
So both. We
Okay.
started off using an off-the-shelf device
Yeah.
because, okay, you would imagine that a startup,
Mm.
uh, hardware startups, software startups,
Mm.
hardware startups would need a longer time to come up with the hardware. You'd need more funding, etc. So
Yeah.
we wanted to do both. So we thought that, okay, we don't need to make the hardware immediately. There are some off-the-shelf stuff which will serve our purpose. Let's
Mm.
just build the AI first. So we took the off-the-shelf material, we started building the AI, and now the AI is performing pretty well. And side by side, now what we have done is we have allocated some resources into working on the hardware side.
Mm.
So there are many reasons why the existing hardware just won't fit our purpose. We can't really scale with those. Those are very expensive. The
Mm.
ones which we are making are much more economical. And like I said, in order, if we were to imagine a future where almost everyone has one of these things, it has to be sleek, it can't be clunky, it has to be cool. So
Mm.
those things we'll also take care of, right?
Mm.
So that's gonna proceed parallelly with the AI development.
This is really fascinating. So, I mean, within the ed tech world, everyone tries to, tailor their education experience to
Mhm.
the neurochemical activity of the learner, um, and it just can't be done without actually attaching something to the brain and giving real feedback. And without giving away your IP, could you kind of delve into a little bit of a tiny bit of the science and give us an overview of what parts of the brain activate when a student
Sure.
is actively learning and taking in the information, vice versa, and when a student isn't taking in the information? Obviously, you're going to have to guard yourself a bit, but could you just give the audience a taste of what
Sure.
happens and the feedback that you're ascertaining from your personal EEG device that you're deploying to the students?
I can absolutely give you the basics of cognitive neuroscience. That's
Hmm.
not IP. That's in the textbooks, right?
Yeah.
So I can
Okay.
absolutely, I can absolutely tell you that. I'll give you a few examples. If a person is drowsy,
Mm,
you will notice a higher. So when you take EEG, so it's basically squiggly voltage activities. Now
mm,
you can split them into various components. You can do a Fourier transform, and you see different kinds of waves which are actually superimposed onto each other. So you break the readings that you have, and you get a bunch of different waves oscillating at different frequencies, and we give them names like alpha, beta, delta, theta, etc.
mm,
So for example, if you are very drowsy and you're not alert, the theta activity in the frontal cortex would be really high,
mm,
uh, as opposed to, let's say, if you are pretty alert and you are trying to engage actively, you'll see a decently high beta ratio from the frontal cortex. But
mm,
on the other hand, if the beta to alpha ratio exceeds a certain limit, then we can tell that you're trying to process a lot of information, and probably you're going to get a little stressed pretty soon. So that's again a no-go zone. So you can literally have a lookup table from cognitive neuroscience and figure out what the brain is doing at that point of time. This is before we go on to the deep learning part. So
mhm,
we take a lot of these information from cognitive neuroscience, and then we feed it to the deep learning algorithm, and we also train the algorithm on various test cases. I
mhm,
can give you one more example. If you are, let's say, if you want to ascertain whether the person's visual attention is high or not, you record from this part of the brain called the occipital lobe.
mm,
That's where a lot of the visual processing happens. So, one more example. If you are someone who's chronically stressed, you will
mm,
see the alpha activity is asymmetric in the different hemispheres. So there are many such nuances that we know of from decades of very cutting edge cognitive neuroscience, which acts as the first level filter to our analysis. And then we pass
mm,
on these information to the deep learning algorithm. And we also tell the deep learning algorithm, look, here's a case where the person didn't understand anything at all. And here's a case where the person understood almost everything that we told him or her.
mm,
And then the algorithm learns to the deep as you know, the deep learning algorithm, it'll look at multiple different parameters which we humans can't really explicitly specify. So
mm,
it's a combination of both,
mm.
right?
So we have a participant in our live chat today. I think it's Fahima. Um,
Hmm.
she asked, "Do you think it can be used for some reason for some
Mm.
disease treatments like essential tremors and Parkinson's,
Yeah.
and maybe other neurological decline in the future?"
Right. Okay. So I can answer this in two ways. One, there are some people who are already trying this. But those are like supreme medical grade treatments. Like I have seen what some people are trying. They're actually implanting an electrode deep in the brain. For
Yeah.
example, in case of epilepsy or tremors,
Mm,
you can actually implant an electrode in the brain where the epileptic activity arises from, and you can train an algorithm to predict 15 to 30 minutes before an epileptic activity will happen, and the
mm.
algorithm is actually good at doing that.
Oh
And
wow.
you don't just stop there, you can provide a stimulation to inhibit that region in order to reduce the chances of getting that epileptic activity. So if
Mm,
nothing else, you can at least alert the person for the next 30 minutes, don't cross a busy street, or just go to a room, sit there. So
mm,
these kind of things people are doing at the medical level, and I presume that is something that Neuralink would also start doing, because they are very keen on this deep brain recording kind of things. But now if you come to the kind of thing that we are doing, which is
mm,
non-invasive, so it
mm,
becomes a little bit difficult to go that deep into a medical case. What we can definitely do is we can comment on chronic stress, we can comment on deficiency of attention. These sort of things we can look at, like from the kind of data that we are gathering, we
mm.
can talk about these things. And of course, then there are remedial measures which we can sort of enforce.
Mm. You touched on mental health and earlier on during this interview, and it's a fascinating area because um, a lot of new age mental health startups,
Mm,
that have got a lot of funding, are just going on behavioral triggers and are relying upon the participant or the user to type in their symptoms. What's
mm,
amazing about yours? What's amazing about your technology is if it can be applied to serving people with mental health issues, it can
mm.
actually it can capture cognitive fitness,
Yes.
which which is a massive and underrated aspect of mental health. Like whenever people talk about mental health, not many people talk about cognitive fitness. And I spoke to a founder. I think I think he was on my fourth podcast. I think his name was Kieran Sparrowhawk.
Okay.
The founder of My Cognition, and he has an app and a game where he gets the users to engage in a game, and the whole
Mm,
point is to increase the cognitive fitness of the
mm,
individual. And what he mentioned was, yes, it's good for everyone, but especially for people with mental health issues, because cognitive lack of cognitive fitness can affect mental health in a massive way, and it doesn't get spoken about as much. And I'm sure some of the data can be transferable because you're applying
absolutely.
your ed tech. Ed tech is your first vertical you're applying your technology to, right?
That's correct. In fact, the kind of AI capabilities that we have actually taken a crack at a more difficult problem. We are trying to understand comprehension, whether a concept that you're
Mm,
trying to understand, whether you're grasping it or not.
mm,
Um, but to look at cognitive fitness, to look at, let's say, like I said, stress, attention, that is actually, from a computational point of view, it's a relatively easier problem to solve,
oh
and we will
wow.
definitely take a crack at it.
Mm,
So the thing, and you're very right. It's very underrated. But the good thing is, it's coming up. People are talking more about it,
mm,
and that's exactly where I mentioned, like how everybody has a smartphone now. If everybody has seamless, tiny brain interfaces, you could be getting an alert notification on your phone every time you're super stressed, or if your attention is going down, your cognitive performance is going down. Then you can play some of these games and enhance it, or you could go and do what relaxes you the most. People
mm,
are coming up with these games. For example, there are these situations where you wear a device on your head, and it can look at your attention levels, and if
mm,
your attention levels are high enough, a ball will move on the screen. So that's the game. Basically, you have to keep the ball rolling. The moment your attention level goes down, uh, the ball sort of stops. So it's a very interesting, so we call it neurofeedback, or even some people call it biofeedback. So it's a very interesting way of training the brain to get it to do what you want it to do.
mm,
Right. So I could think of the one of the other useful cases is that, let's say you are someone who needs to go to a counselor or psychiatrist. You would go to that person maybe once a week, maybe if it's severe, or typically once a month, once in 2 weeks. But if you had a device which is very economical for you to use, and you wear it for 15 minutes a day, the 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 psychiatrist would have a longitudinal uh, view, like every day, how your cognitive fitness is. That person would be able to tell, from, because you could easily chart this out. You could wear it for 15 minutes, and you could draw the graphs, and of course that person will talk to you once a month, but they can see, okay, over the period of this last month, how your stress levels were, or how your attention levels were throughout this whole month, and
mm,
also have a better handle on how you're progressing, what kind of treatments to do for you, etc., things like
mm,
that. So it
mm.
could be a very powerful tool for these professionals.
Yeah, I mean that's really fascinating. I mean, but what's the regulatory pathway for your business? I mean, for edtech, I can't imagine there being a regulatory pathway. And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, or is that only constricted to like healthcare and mental health assessment types of? product?
No. So there are restrictions. So, for example, you're looking at somebody's brain data, right?
Yeah.
So it's very private.
Okay.
So there are these GDPR rules that you have to follow.
Mm.
But thankfully, a lot of people have put in a lot of work to map out what would be a good practice to follow. Like, for
Mm.
example, in most cases, you should, or I, as the founder of this company, should not really know the name of the person who I'm recording from. I can have other identifiers like demography, gender, age, which helps me develop the product, but I
Mm.
shouldn't be able to pry into their private thoughts or whatever.
Mm.
You There are some practices where you add a little bit of noise to the data in such a way that you preserve the statistical correlations. You don't want to mess that up, but you can't actually go back to the exact same signature that you derive out of the brain. So a lot of these laws have been laid out in the EU, in the US. So this just pertains to the data that you're collecting. It's very sensitive data, as you can imagine.
Mm.
So that's on one level. The other level is, if you are going for diagnostics, then it has to be tested and found to be very accurate. Whereas if you're going as a flagging tool, then it's a little lesser, the regulations. But of course, some what you so what we try to do is we try to work with a hospital or agency like that, and try to ascertain, have medical certification that what we are showing is accurate.
Mm.
Right, so as a flagging tool, not as a diagnostic tool. You'll have to go get the diagnosis done separately, but as a flagging tool, it should be. And as for the
Mm.
hardware, what we are trying to do is we are trying to collaborate with a lot of high-end EEG labs throughout the world, where we'll ship our product to them and we'll tell them, okay, test it, see if this meets your lab research grade standards or not. If
Mm.
it doesn't, tell us how to improve it. So that's how we are sort of gold standardizing both the algorithm as well as the hardware.
That's amazing. Uh, the level of insights that you get is obviously going to be in proportion to the level of data that you can get.
Yes.
What understandings and insights do you hope to eventually capture, uh, over the next, say, 24 months that you can't currently capture right now in terms of like neurochemical patterns that are exhibited when learning?
Hmm. So one immediate area of interest that I personally
Mm.
have
Mm.
is looking at the brain activity. I want to tell what are the best ways for you to learn.
Mm.
Are you someone who learns better with examples, or are you better off like mugging up the rules and then going ahead from there? Are you
Mm.
someone who pays more attention to the auditory cues, or are you a very visual individual?
Mm.
These sort of things. And from the brain activity, if we could decipher that, then you can even use this for course or even tutor recommendations. So
Mm.
what we see is that different students would be better suited with some kind of teacher, and some other students would learn better from some other kinds of teacher. And you can see all that in the brain activity that that teacher induces in a bunch of students. And
Mm.
now if you could use that as a basis to recommend either courses or educators or the kinds of material that you should be looking at, then
Mm.
basically you are personalizing your study material according to how your brain learns the best.
Mm.
So that is something that I'm very interested to do. But for that, we need a little bit more data than what we have right now.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
um, are you fundraising right now? And if
Yes.
you don't mind saying, would you be open to kind of highlighting how much and what you hope it can help you facilitate?
Right. So we, as you know, we went through the Entrepreneur First
Hmm.
program, and they give you 55,000 USD to start off, and we are still using that, and that gives us quite a decent bit of runway. And now what we are doing, we are trying to raise a seed round. So what we are looking at is somewhere around 500,000 USD, and what
Mm.
we think this will help us achieve is that it will help us get the right amount of data, like the amount of data that we need, and then but that's one part. The second part is, as you can imagine, the brain is the most complex object in the observable universe, like literally it is,
Mm.
and the data that comes out of it is like supremely complex. So what we need is very high end machine learning individuals who are good at solving problems, like looking at patterns and guessing what the brain was doing. So those resources are expensive. So these are the two things we would want to spend on, and we estimate that for the next 18 to 24 months we'd be good with 500,000 USD. And what we can do using that money is that here's our brain library, and using that we can solve problems which we haven't seen before. What do I
Mm,
mean by that? For example, you have an tech company, you have a math course running, and you come to me and tell me, can you get humans to watch this course, record their brain activity, and tell me how to improve? I can
mm,
do that certainly. And now how we are doing it is we will actually go out there, ask people to watch the course, record their brain activity, and then come back to you with the suggestions. But what we are trying to do right now is eliminate that data collection for every job.
mm,
So what we are trying to do is we have enough data and we have the signatures of audio and visuals which are highly engaging as opposed to those that are not. We
mm,
have audio and visual signatures of content that is comprehensible, which is understandable, which is lucid, as opposed to those that are not. So now I do my data collection, and now somebody else comes to me and says, can you look at this chemistry tutorial that I've made and tell me how good will this do? So now I can do that immediately on our server using our AI, because our AI knows what kind of visual and auditory pattern induces what kind of brain activity.
mm.
So that's the capability we want to reach. What enables us is that it frees us from the hardware dependency to a great extent. For every job, we don't have to go and collect data.
That's interesting. And the in a uber optimistic world, 12 to 18 months from now, what do you hope to kind of achieve? I mean, I think you've actually answered it. I mean, what do you hope to kind of achieve from a company and a product standpoint? But I think you've answered the product standpoint.
Hmm. Company standpoint, we would absolutely love it if we have multiple verticals running. EdTech is one. Supremely interested in the mental health condition that, like we talked about, it's upcoming. It's important. We need to look at that absolutely, and
Mm,
also gaming. We want to have these three verticals up. We want revenue coming in from all of these three streams.
mm,
Most importantly, what we want is we want people to perceive our company as someone who is a frontier company in neurotech.
mm,
There are good neurotech companies coming out of San Francisco. There are quite a few of them. Uh,
mm,
from India, not too many,
mm.
and there's no reason why that should be the case. We want to
Yeah.
change that.
Mm. I mean, one question I asked many of your fellow Indian entrepreneur first cohort founders, I mean, including Prapti and Rupal, which I know you're very good friends
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Um, I mean, what have you kind of learned about yourself on this entrepreneurial journey, and what kind of shifts have you had to make within yourself, moving from academia to finding your own company?
Hmm. All right. Interesting. It's more of an introspection.
Is it, yeah,
Yeah, it's an introspection. Um, okay. Am I allowed to swear? No, I guess not.
yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's fine.
Basically, having your ass on the line. In
Mm,
research, you don't have that. You don't have your hair on fire. You have a lot of time to solve a problem. You can sit back, smoke your pipe, think about things,
mm,
and go ahead and do it. But here, there's much more stricter deadlines, because otherwise, literally, your company will go bankrupt. Like
mm,
that's the other side of it. When I'm doing my research, okay, it'll push back things by a few months. That's pretty much it. Uh, in research, it's just me and my experiments, like me and my mice or me and my microscopes.
mm,
But here it involves other people, coordinating with them. For being the founder, I am the one responsible for the teamwork, for setting the culture.
mm,
That is a lot of pressure which I did not have. That so in research, it's more of a personal thing. You sit back, you're good at it, you do it, you love doing it. Here, yes, all of those are true. You're good at it, you love it, but there is a lot more at stake. And I'm not just working for myself. I have a commitment to other people who are working for me as well. So
mm,
I better show results. I better show some revenue. I better get in that next round of funding.
mm,
Otherwise, these other people are also going to suffer. That's a
mm,
lot of pressure, but I think I'm loving taking all of that right now. I was ready for this. I think at some point I was craving all of that,
mm.
sitting in the basement just with the microscope. I think I was craving a lot of these things, and I'm loving this.
This is amazing, amazing. I think that wraps our interview up. Is there anything else you'd like to shout out before we end the stream?
Um, shout outs, yes. I think I always give a shout out to the researchers who are working in their lab, sitting by themselves, and who I feel is quite undervalued, in my opinion, um, because I know many people who are working who are not even getting paid, and that's just terrible. So what I would tell them is get out into the real world. You are valuable, and a lot of people are ready to put down a lot of money for the value that you can add to a company or to the lives of people in general. So definitely take that leap. And if you're scared, like I was, to take the leap, maybe try out EF or any other such programs which have which have made a science out of the vague art of entrepreneurship. The step by step things that you can follow. So do it, and now is the best time to start.
Awesome. A great advert for EF.
And other people as well. But
Yeah,
it's actually a vehicle for others who are stuck in a situation which I was in. So
amazing.
that's where I'm coming from.
Amazing.
I want to help those people. Yeah.
We'll end the stream, but we'll end the stream on LinkedIn. But stay on the stream. I'd love to speak to you a little bit more. Um, uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. So Shoma will add all of the details of his company at the bottom in the comment section. So if you guys have any questions, if you want to reach out to him personally, feel free to reach out to him. He'll comment on the comment section under the stream later on. So thank you for joining us, and I really appreciate you jumping on. 1 second.